we can go a bunch of different directions here, but what might be more fun because we're at DNA House is, answering, any questions, but maybe I'll start by telling a couple of stories that I usually wouldn't say in a public forum, but I'll talk about here. We were having some conversations a few minutes ago about massively multiplayer games. I'm assuming for those that are a little bit older in the room, you played World of Warcraft or Ultima Online, EverQuest, Final Fantasy. Any MMO players in here? Only a handful. How many of you have not played an MMO and didn't have a background in this sort of stuff? All right, just not everybody's paying attention. Just being short. That's where I got my start in this business. I grew up collecting baseball cards and comic books and Magic the Gathering cards, and I traded these things. And eventually a game came out called Sanctum from a small company called Digital Addiction. And it was a Magic the Gathering game meets chess. And I had gone into the game and, off and on ranked number one player in this game, always in the sort of top 10, top 5. But first position, you can only hold for so long if you're active. There is a degree of luck in these games. They're not entirely skill-based like chess, for example. But I'd gone in and I recognized, and this was where the original insight arrived for me, which is there was demand to buy the singles and not just the random packs of cards. And having recognized that business model in the analog game world, I contacted the game company and said I'd like to replicate the analog business model, like a baseball card shop or comic book store would sell singles. I'd like to buy your virtual packs of cards in bulk at a discount, and I'd like your permission to be able to sell singles, because sometimes people don't want to have to buy 100 packs to get that one card, or they don't necessarily want to go trade for it. They may not have something that gets them access to it. And I said a robust secondary market drives and fuels a more powerful primary market. They're like, that makes sense. But the insight was that just because something was intangible or digital didn't make it less valuable. Human behavior doesn't change, whether we're in the analog or digital worlds. And then Ultima Online came out and EverQuest and ended up becoming the primary market maker of game currencies in the world. I was telling a story about how I had started in EverQuest and then expanded into Final Fantasy XI, which gave me a second revenue stream because I was running two of the main gaming markets, and I was able to then acquire my main competitor in EverQuest. The old adage of, buy low, sell high. I chose the inverse. I'd buy high and sell low. I paid more than everybody in the business, and I sold for basically what I paid for it because I had another income stream in Final Fantasy. And I told my main competitor, I'm really rich, and I'm just tired of competing with you. So I'm going to run like this until you're out of business, unless you want to be acquired. I wasn't liquid, but I bluffed well and ended up acquiring his business, who I went on and did a lot of things with. John Yantis and I started mining together with Scott Walker, started a lot of companies together like Tether, Blockchain Capital. He went on with one of my other partners to start Wax, another EOS fork. But John and I were old partners, did a lot of work together. But that business ended up being a major contributor to this industry. It was your online gamers that realized that buying a digital currency had utility in their life. And so the leap to seeing value in something like Bitcoin was much shorter than it was for almost anyone else, certainly in large numbers. And so the 2014 sort of market and the industry's growth largely came from online gamers. Most people don't directly see that, as well as a lot of the main entrepreneurs. Jesse Powell, that started Kraken, was Loot.com, and, Jed McCaleb, Mt. Gox was Magic the Gathering Online. And so that was, a big sort of the background for many of us that led to our, call it, inevitable entrance into this market. But that's a fun one now as we see gaming. You just had Pentagon up here, happy to be. Well, I mean, we're finally in a position where the infrastructure and the industry has gotten to a point where it's functional and usable by non-technical people. It's taken this long, where we're hitting this sort of mainstream adoption and the infrastructure is user-friendly and secure enough that, we can really continue to grow. And because of the scale that we finally achieved, what an amazing time. I mean, for those of us that were early in this business and we're entrepreneurs, certainly as U.S. citizens and Americans, whether you knew it or not, you were at risk of being indicted, jailed, debanked, slandered, sensationalized. I mean, it was a very high-risk business. If you were in crypto in 2012, 13, 14, 15, I mean, being associated with this industry was serious taint. And so to all the pioneers that took those risks to build, thank you. And thank God those days are now behind us. I mean, March 7th, we have a crypto president of the United States of America. I mean, thank God for President Bukele in El Salvador and the, leaning in that we've seen in the UAE, smaller places like Estonia and very small places like Palau. But what the United States does sets the tone for the world. The United States of America is no longer hunting us, but enticing us, inviting us back to build. We truly have permission to change the world right now, and what an exciting time it is. Again, March 7th is when the crypto summit occurred at the White House, the day that the U.S. launched the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, the idea that the U.S. government is accumulating Bitcoin in a digital Fort Knox. You now have governments around the world doing the same thing. It is, it's the difference between night and day. And I am so grateful that I sleep well at night for the first time in a long time because I knew the risks that we were taking. And they were very severe. Certainly anybody on the front line, certainly anyone building in the United States. I mean, that was when we built Tether. Effectively all the U.S. citizens gave it to the international partners after we were up and launched because the risks of running a digital dollar was the scariest thing I've ever built. I'll tell another fun one, which is a story very few people know about, is back when Ethereum was launching, we were originally going to put 5,000 Bitcoin into the Ethereum sale. And it's worth talking about this because we're in Toronto. And Toronto played such an important role in this industry's development, specifically Ethereum. But they were so delayed and there were so many reasons to have doubt. So we only put 500 Bitcoin in the Ethereum crowd sale, but that would got us 1 million Ether. Most of you don't recall this, but issuing new tokens back then was not an instant thing. When the Ethereum crowd sale was concluded, it was a year before the tokens were distributed to the contributors. There was a year. But because we were part of Mastercoin, one of the 3 original layer 2s on Bitcoin, Counterparty, Colored Coins, and Mastercoin, we also were the first ICO ever. We did the first token sale back in the summer of 2013 with Mastercoin. But we were a layer 2. And so one of the fun things we did, which I didn't tell these stories for the longest time, is we created the first smart contract. I'm the only known participant in this project. It was stealth and anonymous. But what we did is we created an Ether coin running on top of Mastercoin that was attached to the 1 million Ether, and then put that on all the early exchanges. And so we were the sole market maker for Ethereum for the first year. And that deal worked out very well because there was a lot of demand. We sold 80,000 ETH for our original 500 Bitcoin. And so we ended up with 920,000 ETH effectively for free on the trade. But that was a fun one that I've usually not talked about for obvious reasons. But it's a different world now. And I think enough time has elapsed that I'm not going to have any problems with the CFTC. That was just it was too interesting to be able to fulfill a market demand like that. But maybe it's worth answering a couple of questions because I can talk about most anything. I'm excited about everything right now. But is there any direction anyone would like to go? Is there any questions? Please.
Yeah, so before you since like the Steam days, so and I see that you're working on Backstage. So is entertainment and gaming still like I think one of the big promise of the metaverse was like having MMORPGs on chain, right?
So yeah, just to repeat the question. So, entertainment obviously still is seems like it's still one of your core focuses, and obviously you have the background in MMORPG, and one of the big promise of the metaverse was able to have these decentralized MMORPGs. Do you feel like the infrastructure, the development, and like I guess the appetite is there for something like this, and do you think it could be done?
So, yeah, but one of the things that prevented this from happening is the infrastructure wasn't ready. But there's one other thing. I mean, what is the primary reason we use a blockchain? For interoperability. So one of the problems that you have with hardcore games is how many hardcore games do people play at one time? Usually one. Because the time commitment to excel in an MMORPG is basically, you don't have a life outside of the game world. To really succeed in these games, the amount of hours that you put into an MMORPG is such that you don't have time to play anything else. So the primary benefit of interoperability when you don't operate outside of that one world is somewhat limited. So let's talk about the market need. So if you remember the game industry, historically it was a packaged software business. You'd sell a box, and that was your business model. Because of Asia and piracy, the idea of having a centralized server that you paid to access a multiplayer game world that was persistent was a way to make money because you couldn't sell a packaged software in many countries in the world, specifically in Asia where the propensity to game was so high. You needed a different business model, which was selling access to the server on a subscription business model, which then migrated a whole new industry, which was a software as a service play, which was very big, certainly in MMORPGs. It was the primary business model. They technically did both. You'd still buy your game software and then pay a subscription fee because they had to give the retail distributors, action to be able to get, product in the face or in the hands of the retail market. Because of what we did in MMORPGs and creating economies around the assets, eventually a buddy of mine, Joshua Hong and K2, created the first free-to-play game where they said, well, instead of selling packaged software or subscriptions, what if we give access to the game away for free and run a business on a microtransactional model, which really disrupted the industry, certainly in core gaming. In casual gaming, it's fine, right? You're catching a user, putting them into a game mechanic, and trying to get them to spend as much money as possible. But in hardcore games, it really took away, I think, a lot of the fun in the game because it really wasn't free to play, but it was pay to win. And it really affected the purity of those environments. So what excites me here is not necessarily the interoperability, but more what Second Life did, which is in probably creating an MMORPG where you're paying a subscription fee or you're staking for infrastructure, but ultimately giving your users property rights, and letting your users own the economy and benefit from the economy. You operate effectively as the central bank and the infrastructure provider into those worlds, because that's really what is the benefit of building something like this, and doing it in a decentralized fashion. It's not because of the interoperability, because each world is kind of its own thing. People have talked about the idea of being able to migrate your skin or your avatar from one game to another, but if I'm a game operator, I'm not trying to make the switching cost easier. I'm not trying to take my competitive game and say, I might do that if I'm a struggling company. Of course, I'd like to find a way to allow, the biggest companies' products to be able to move into my game. But it's hard to get those sort of deals done. And by design, those people are trying to create walled gardens. to keep their users engaged with their product. But I think in the play to earn model is where the opportunity lies, which is effectively what we all originally did. Is we figured out how to basically live and work in these virtual environments. And I think that has promise in the future. And so that's kind of like the whole story arc of the industry and where I think the opportunity lies. I think the infrastructure is ready enough. You can certainly figure out how to allow your token holders to effectively stake and provide infrastructure to earn off it so that you're building an economy of participation. And then ultimately your end users that are playing. But it's still hardcore games. The content has to be good. Content is king. It's like movies. It's a hit-driven business. You can put all the energy into it in the world and still fail because, you're capturing lightning in a bottle to make a hit. But I think it's there, and this would be the right time to be pursuing it. I'm actively looking at games. At DNA, we're looking at building a game-specific fund right now, just dedicated to that ecosystem because of my background and some of the people that I can bring together. And so I'm excited by it. In terms of, the rest of the entertainment industry, I grew up starring in movies. And so my background is principally was as an actor and then an entrepreneur building digital things. At 16, I raised $88 million to build the first streaming media company back in 1997. So created all your concepts like webisodes. We were the precursor to Netflix, Hulu, and YouTube. But broadband didn't roll out at the rate that everybody forecast. So in the spring of 2000, when the internet bubble 1.0 imploded, like 99 out of 100, so did we. But I had a good run there. And that's when I realized, and I went to gaming. Because I took a look at the entertainment industry. The entertainment industry didn't acknowledge games as an entertainment business. It was frowned upon. It was looked down on. It wasn't respectable. It wasn't true entertainment. It's games. It was basically movies, television, and music were the respectable industries. And gaming was looked down upon as this kind of like thing for boys in their basement or men that behave like them. But I took a look at, I learned a couple of things and, call it beginning in business. Success in an industry is all about growth rate. I looked at the music business that was falling apart because of Napster and things at the time and digital, and the movie business and television businesses that were generally flat. And the games business was looked down upon, but it was growing like a hockey stick. I'm like, well, this is the other aspect of gaming that just the primary industry won't acknowledge. And I do know one thing about business. You want to be in industries that are growing. If it's not growing, there's no real path to exit and there's no real path to fundraising. Nobody wants to put money in an industry that's flat or in decline. And there's no big returns to be had. But I think entertainment is interesting. Peter and I were just looking at the things going on with AI. It's publicly out there. Me and a few partners were the other bidders last year. There were only 2 bids allowed to buy Paramount. And so we were the other bid against Larry Ellison and his son David. So the Oracle versus us, we were the righteous 8. And we were the ones buying Paramount, CBS, MTV, BET, Nickelodeon, Showtime. That deal still hasn't closed, so we'll see what happens. And then I also worked on buying CNN in 2020. And so I'm active in the media space. Steve Bannon worked full-time for me in my 20s. Big part of the Tea Party was started in my office, as was Breitbart Media. We gave Andrew Breitbart free office space. So I've always been in media. And so AI is the thing that I find most interesting. Crowdsourcing of capital. If you look at like angel.com or what Republic is doing right now, the idea that the studios are not going to control the pipeline of content anymore. And thank God, because the movie business is basically tentpole sequels, remakes. Like, where are all the good movies that we used to get? Because there's not a demand of funding them. But I think as we, the people, start contributing to the projects we want to see made, which might be documentaries, not where we don't even ever expect to make our money back. We just want a message or a story told because it inspires us or we have an opinion and we want to stand up for something. Or whether it be supporting Eli Roth right now that made, a lot of your greatest horror movies, stuff with Quentin Tarantino, actor. He's got a project live on Republic right now where you can invest in his basically production company and empower him to make what he wants to make without it being greenlit. And so you can give him money, participate in that production company. And so I think that the capital formation around entertainment can change because of the work that we've been doing here in the democratization of funding mechanisms. And then AI is obviously super interesting, and the fact that distribution is changing. So I'm re-entering the entertainment business. It's where I started, come full circle. I'm even starring in movies again. Can't believe that happened. But I'm bullish, in short, and try to give some of the background of what's going on and the specific insights of why now, right? I'm very good at market timing because I understand what's going on and why now. Because one of the it's better to be too late than too early. If you're too early to something, you run out of money and you go off a cliff and you're done. If you're too late, you may have missed the mark, but at least money's flowing into the industry and you can get acqui-hired. There's lots of paths to call it a single if you're too late to a business. If you're too early, you pretty much always die.
Yeah. Hey, Brock. So you've made a lot of inroads into government recently. You ran for president. You brought Eric to New York mayor to see us in Puerto Rico. And you're very close with the current administration. I'm of the belief that governments really are the ultimate blockchain tech user, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on that, please.
Well, I mean, blockchains are systems of governance at their core, right? Governance systems for large communities of users. What are governments? Effectively the same thing. And so at what point does technology affect government? And what technologies are going to do it? The same ones that we're here talking about. Most people don't acknowledge or see that, but absolutely. Technology is going to improve the ways that government operate. I mean, long term, if we want to go to the distant future, clearly in terms of how elections are operated, there's going to be a big play there, but also how things are funded. A lot of things are done through sort of RFPs and requests for proposals. Dan Larimer, to go back to BitShares, we built Block One and EOS together, but he wrote a good book, if you're curious about this, called More Equal Animals. And we built the Eden operating system, which was to build a governance layer on top of EOS where you'd have democratically elected leadership. And when we run for elections with this experiment, I basically would make a commitment of what I am going to do for the community. I put forth a budget of what it's going to cost. I didn't say, hey, here, look at me. I actually say, this is what I'm going to do. This is what it's going to cost. I get elected, and then I'm given the resources to transparently direct. Instead, you're empowering people effectively in systems of governance to manage. Like if I was great at building roads and I was running for an election here, I might not be running for mayor of Toronto, but what I may say is, I have a proposal for the government to fix our roads. Here's my background, my merit, my qualifications, what it's going to cost. And then that being voted on because we, the people, want the roads changed. And so there's a lot of interesting things as you think about governance in the future that we're effectively experimenting with. We're building the prototypes that effectively, I think we'll find our way into those systems. I've spent a lot of time on it. I do believe that's where we're going, but it's going to take some time. Governments are the most bureaucratic systems there are, and therefore they're going to be the slowest to change. But we're making inroads. You have innovative governments around the world. So I've served in the United Nations representing 22 countries. Specifically, the youth was my prior appointment. Every country in Central and South America, the Dominican Republic, Spain, and Portugal. And we were the only permanent mission that represented the youth in the UN. And so by default, we represented the youth of the world, but formally for 21 countries. I changed my role in the United Nations right before UNGA last year to go serve for the country of Palau. And that's because Palau is will do things first. So what I really care is about setting precedent. And we have an incredible president that's pro-innovation, open to big ideas, and all big things have small beginnings. Even if it's a small country, I like nimble. And I like innovative and courageous. The future favors the bold. And so doing a lot of stuff there. I was just made 2 weeks ago the ambassador to the Central American Parliament. I'm currently the chairman of the Nations Development Council of Lives Amplify. We're the largest organization of former presidents and prime ministers outside the UN. And so I'm doing work with about half the world's countries, typically at the head of state. and advising them not just on this stuff, but innovation in general. So I'm very active in government, both domestically and internationally, and travel around the world advising, whomever is ready to actually do something. I used to go talk to all of them. Now I'm trying to be a little bit more discerning of like who's actually going to do something. But a big part of it was I'd talk about innovation, and the answer I'd usually get from governments was, but what's the United States going to do? And so most of the world was sitting and waiting to see if America leads. What I'm seeing in terms of my conversation since March 7th is an incredible appetite. I just sit down and I explain, Mr. President, you do understand what the U.S. is doing, and the U.S. intends to be the capital of this innovation in the world. You don't need to be first, but you want to be a fast follower. Often the second mouse gets the cheese. And future favors the bold, and the value that gets created economically from systems like this is not going to be dispersed equally. It's going to be spread around based upon how early are you to the game. How well did you take advantage of this market opportunity? How well did you entice people like us to come to your country and build there? Because you don't need to be first, but you want to be a fast follower based upon good data, but you don't want to be last. This is a period in time where nations are going to rise and fall. And it's going to be in this decade that the winners and losers are likely going to be determined. And so that's generally the message I'm delivering to heads of state these days.
Thank you. I'm also a member of Lives Amplified, and may not be top of mind for you, but you probably remember that I created the Decide governance system, the most advanced governance system, still used on Telos, like about 2 or 3 years before you guys built that. So I'm in the same camp.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to, I like small groups because I like operating with like SEAL teams. I find too many cooks in the kitchen just, makes getting anything done. But, I like highly qualified people that have spent years working on something, and then, figure out what can we do. So, we can talk about that. I'm far from done on government. I mean, my main focus these days are government or governance, culture, and faith, religion, belief.
That's what I focus on East Protocol too. So
I'm doing a lot of healthcare. I got into buying hospitals, nursing homes, health insurance. I'm doing a lot of healthcare these days because I really care how. Well, the declining birth rate in the world is the main concern. The idea that, our issue isn't overpopulation. It's a declining birth rate, and it's going to be an underpopulation of people that are in a productive age. I don't think that AI and robots are going to take our jobs away in the time frame that some people are confident about. I still very much believe in humans, and I'm on Team Human. Though I believe greatly in the tools that we're able to build to improve and increase productivity and lead to a more fruitful life. But the only way out of this birth rate problem right now is longevity. We have to make people live longer, and they have to live well enough that they continue to be productive members of society. Because 9 women can't make a baby in a month, nor can we educate them.
more sex, the only answer.
Yes, please, but not with you. I think we got to wrap up, and I'll go one last one. Hold on, what? Go ahead, because I know we're going to talk movies most likely.
So I want to ask about with global tension escalating, do you think people will go to gold, digital version of gold, like rapper, what do you call it, Tax G, or should we do something Ethereum? Just what's a good?
Yeah, so I'm not a maximalist. I don't believe there is one answer. I don't believe that, everyone is going to go to Bitcoin or everyone's going to go to gold. And I'm a big fan of choice and freedom. And, people are going to pick the thing that they're, boomers are going to go to gold. Younger, more digital, technically savvy people are going to go to Bitcoin, or they're going to want to see higher yields and have a higher risk tolerance and go for other things, and, to each their own. But clearly, yeah, there's a shift occurring, and, everybody that's been in this business admitted is likely done very well, rewarded for the risks that you've taken. And the returns are commensurate with the level of risk, typically. So I don't think there's any one answer. I'm a fan of gold. I'm a fan of precious metals. I mean, obviously, the most important conversation right now is really around rare earth and magnets and things of that nature, because pretty much all of the critical natural resources used to build all the things we care about are almost entirely refined in China. I mean, that's what this whole sort of trade war is about. We have an absolute dependency, the world does, everyone in the world, because China's the only place that is refining these incredibly critical minerals so that they can be used to build anything that we do, not just electronics, but everything. And China's dependent upon the U.S. economy. So it's a mutually assured destruction, sort of asymmetric World War III. But fortunately, thank God for, China and this administration being able to come to a deal in Switzerland last weekend. Because we were literally 30 days away from Armageddon. Almost no one was following that. Because China had shut off all shipping and turning all boats around. The world's economy would have, we'd be in Armageddon in like 3 weeks if this had not been resolved. How close we are, and how little people know about how close we are and on the brink. So the number one concern I have in the world right now is war and conflict, because that's the only thing that can rain on our parade in short order. The environment, yeah, it's a concern, but we've got time to fix a lot of these things. That's the one event that can really end it all in quick. Peace is the answer. Love.
Quick question. 10 years ago, they said that a billionaire basically improves a billion people's life. You still believe in that today?
Yeah, absolutely. I've won the game of life multiple times. I don't play for me. I play this game of life for you. I mean, because that's the only interesting game to play. It's a selfless game. The self is no longer that. It's not about you anymore. You play for, a larger goal or objective. And so, yeah, the old line was a billionaire to me is not someone with $1 billion, but someone who's positively impacting the lives of 1 billion people. I measure success by impact, not by what you have. But those resources are important. Resources are key to making a big impact in the world. But I don't measure success by someone hoarding. I measure success by someone using the gifts they've been given to do great things in the world. And I think that that's more important. As I like to say, money is just a form of stored energy or energy. As Bruce Lee would say, it wishes to flow like water because it's a current. See, we're just meant to be conductors of it, directing that energy to the people, places, and things we want to see impacted positively. And that is our role as a steward or custodian of assets and things. Thank you, everybody, coming to DNA House. Don't know who's next, but always fun to hang with each and every one of you. Continue to build a better, brighter world. Let's go, future. With you, we can make it.